the pauses were so popular last time.
Mm.
I don't have any goldfish this time. As my life comes into sort of a good point of equilibrium, as I sort of find a good place with both my mental and my physical health and financial stability, and I find that I'm getting older, calmer, and I'm more of a homebody, and pleasures I like in life are simple. I come to terms with the fact that more and more, the better my life gets, the less interesting I am on a podcast.
Mm.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Magical Talking Hat podcast, the only podcast in the world that is not hosted by at least one Oscar winner. Literally every other one. Look it up. It's real. I'm Tony.
And I'm William, and this is episode 642.
To be fair, I don't think we've ever submitted anything to the Academy for consideration.
I mean, you've got a point there.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
For those of you just joining us, we have a hat. It's magical in that it has its own email address, themagicaltalkinghat@gmail.com. People used to send in emails to that email address, themagicaltalkinghat@gmail.com, with whatever they wanted in them. And then the hat magically would forward them to us. We'd read them on the air, talk about them till we got bored, move on with our lives. But the hat hadn't sent us anything now, so the magic is gone.
To be fair, we used to be better at answering the emails too. I mean,
we've been getting pretty good again, I thought. But
yeah, it's been on the upward climb, I guess.
We had times where we would be averaging 3 an episode. Yeah, but then our lives just got super interesting. So
yeah, I don't think that happened.
I think the podcast started before the rise of the streaming services.
Mm-hmm.
So now we can just talk about those things. How has your week been? Your last week of freedom?
Yeah, because
you're getting married next week.
Even though the class doesn't officially start until Monday, the course material is available tomorrow. And I can't resist, of course. I'm going to go in and, do whatever. But
such a nerd.
So in a way, this is my last day. But so this past week, let's see. So the 4th of July happened, and the kids came over, so that was nice. And it's been the
what
first
terrible movie did you watch 7 of?
No, it didn't do that. They weren't actually they weren't here that long. Compared to that, compared to a day-long marathon, it was just a normal length visit. And it's the first time we've seen the granddaughter since it's been a few weeks. But, it was nice to have them over, and but not much else to report. I did start reading the history of Marion County, Iowa. It was published in 1914. Very interesting. I shouldn't have. I'm kind of breaking my do nothing rule, right?
A little bit. But I mean,
I've known of this book for, I don't know, a few decades now, and I've always thought, gosh, I'd really kind of like to just read that. And I've skimmed over huge parts of it because a lot of it is just a lot of the early county histories. Like every single county in Iowa has one around that time, and sometimes a little earlier. And a lot of times in the histories, they'll have things like, well, this was the first election, township election in this township in this county, and these are the minutes. I mean, it'll just have all that stuff, and that's not all interesting, but for some reason now it is. Like right now, I'm reading pretty much everything, and I'm interested in it all. But in the past, I've skimmed over a lot of parts of it and just looked for specific things I wanted to know, and it's just super interesting to me. I hope I can read other histories, other counties, because one thing I want to know is, and it's hard to find it. You pretty much have to read the whole thing word for word to find it. It's not going to be a section about this. But what I want to know is, like, what kind of Native American activity and stories are there in these old histories? Marion County, really, so far, I'm most of the way through it, and there's like one story of a lake that doesn't exist anymore south of Pella. It's just really interesting. So I'm hoping that I can look into that some more, because the thing about Iowa is that before 1832, a lot of Native people lived in Iowa, and the area that became Iowa. But
wait, there were people here before white people? Get the fuck
yes.
out. Why
Okay.
did we
Now listen.
move in? I mean, why was there room? Did we all, like, where are they now? What happened? Did they go somewhere cooler?
Okay.
Did they reserve space?
All right, stop. The reason
So
I'm talking about this is it's pretty common in states west of the Mississippi for there to be a lot of stories, Native American stories, even if there's not even Native American reservations around in those places, because in the fairly recent past, we're talking about the middle of the 19th century, white settlers were interacting with Native Americans and having, in the Iowa territory, white settlers and Native people were intermarrying and everything. So, where are the stories about the landscape that a lot of other states that don't have reservations in them and don't have a high Native population, but some of those states still retain a lot of that Native American heritage? What about Iowa? Why, there's lots of landmarks in Iowa that Native Americans probably had stories about. Why don't we know them? So I guess I'm thinking one place for me to start and trying to find that. And I've been looking for this type of thing for, I don't know, like I said, ever since I was a elementary school kid, and I first realized that there were people here before, and they had a culture, and they had, God only knows what it was like. And so I've always wanted to know, well, what were they like? Where did they live? What kinds of things did they do? What were their beliefs? I've always wanted to know those things, and when I go to other states, I try to find that stuff out before I visit that state. Like, I know a little bit about the Native people that lived in East Tennessee before my ancestors lived there. Some of that information is really easy to find in most other states, especially in Eastern states, and especially in certain Western states. But in some states, such as Iowa, it's really hard to find that information and to get to know who those people were. Now, there's a natural history museum in Iowa City. Have you ever been there?
no,
It's in McBride
I
Hall.
think about it.
And there is extensive information about the Native people who lived in this area there, which is super interesting. But other than that place, it's really hard to find that kind of information. So I'm just going to go through old county histories. Like I said, just about every county has one around the turn of the century, and see, what they have. I found when I was in Clear Lake, because Abby's family's from Clear Lake. When her grandmother passed away, I found some Clear Lake history books, and they had some interesting information because the Clear Lake area was inhabited by Sioux, Winnebago, and Sac and Fox. And so,
just one lady in a mobile home.
now there were many.
Sioux in a Winnebago.
Come on, I can't believe you just said that. But
you said it first.
There were a lot of tribes in contention of that real estate up there, and they had some specific beliefs about Clear Lake that they mostly avoided it because they thought something bad lived in there. I don't know what the specific story is, because the account that I read wasn't that specific, and I don't know which tribes felt that way, if they all felt that way.
When Clear Lake turned muddy, the British Empire would fall, I believe, was the particular.
Well, Clear Lake is a natural glacial feature that's fed by a spring, and that's what kept it so legitimately clear. But maybe because it was spring fed, certain Native people were suspicious of it, because some Native beliefs around springs are that spirits live in the springs, and some of those spirits are nice and some of them aren't nice. Maybe they thought the Clear Lake one wasn't nice.
I'm aware. I've seen Ranma one half. I'm aware.
Anyway, these stories fascinate me, and I found out that there was a lake. It's no longer there, south of Pella. That there were actually two springs, and I'm unclear as to whether or not there was like a water feature associated with this spring and a separate water feature associated with this spring. When I say water feature, I mean I'm not even sure what the water feature was, like a pond, or it could have just been a marsh, because some springs just make a wet feature, they don't like flow out. But one of them, one of the springs was called Thunder Spring, because I think it did have a pool sort of above it, and sounds would come out of there. It was said, like a sort of a percussive sound that, thunder, I guess, Thunder Spring. I'm like, wow, that is so interesting. I want to know more about that. And that would be like 20 miles from my house. And there's a spring on my land, which, what kind of, did native people know about it? Was it a spring that you could see flowing, or was it just a wet spot in the ground? What is the water that comes out of there drinkable? The native people know about it? I don't know. I'm just fascinated by all of that stuff. So maybe I have enough information that I can maybe go up to Pella or go somewhere in that area and see if I can get more information about it.
I think you at least have enough information that you could whack together a Wikipedia article and nobody could really gainsay you.
I
So
don't know.
I've started reading finally The Cities We Became by N.K. Jemisin. That's a series about this idea that a person or people take on the embodiment of a city, and they sort of are custodians for the essence of the city, and they in a certain way are the city, are an avatar for the city. And I've been when I read this, made total sense, because I'm pretty confident that is what you are for Iowa. So for most of this, I would say if you just sort of looked inside, you would find the answers.
By the answers.
Also, we need to make a movie. It's gonna be called Regional Treasure, and it's gonna be about the Iowa State conspiracy to cover up the history and folklore of the native peoples.
Wow.
So like you're gonna give the same speech you just did, but in like excited Nick Cage voice. Like most states would have histories of all of this, but that's the worst Nick Cage ever. I feel that's what I feel worst about it. I don't feel bad about Sue in the Winnebago, but I do feel bad about that Nick Cage impression.
Could we get Pedro Pascal to be in it? That would be awesome.
I hear he's a little busy these days, but I would love to make a pitch to him.
Anyway. So that's what I've been doing. I know it's a nerd, stupid thing to do, but that's what I've been doing. How's your week been?
I mean, we would have assumed. Now wait, did you see any huge movies in the last week that you're forgetting to tell about? Have you seen the commercial for the new Superman animation? I just saw it like 20 minutes ago. It was a YouTube ad for it. They're doing a brand new Superman animated, and it's on Adult Swim, but next day on Max. And it appears to just be called Superman.
Wow. I'll have to keep an eye out for that. I don't think I heard of that.
It was not a great trailer. It was one of those that just took like 2 minutes from probably the first episode. So it's like one scene. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't give me a lot of information.
Like a clip or something.
Basically. I found older movies who didn't like have a trailer. I often get that because I watch a lot of old movies, and if I'm looking through the trailer, sometimes the trailer is like this trailer is 137 seconds long. It is 137 seconds of the movie just taken out of a chunk, and those are the worst because I'm like, you're showing me one scene, and it's not a scene. It's never like a scene where they are explaining the premise. It's just a scene.
All right.
And this was the same thing. This was clearly the Clark Kent figures out he's Superman scene.
Oh.
And I'm like, yeah, we all already knew that. That's not.
No, I don't think so. I don't know what movie I would have. I mean, I guess I could have seen Indiana Jones or something, but we haven't done that
Are you gonna?
in the theater. No, no, no.
I mean, I get if people say it's awesome, I will, but we didn't need the fourth one, even if the fourth one had been good, and the fourth one was really not good. We can stop.
The next thing I see in the theater may be Haunted Mansion, if the reviews are good.
Yeah. Oh man, I am really unhappy with how much hope I have for that. And I got to be honest, it's 100% the cast.
It's a good
Like
cast, I think.
there are a lot of people. So one of two things, because those people are not stupid.
No,
Either it's gonna be pretty good, or Disney paid them a shit ton of money.
well, I mean, I don't think
And
Eddie
and
Murphy.
honestly, the second one doesn't preclude the first one, but
Right. I don't think Eddie Murphy's stupid either. I still can't figure out how he got
I
roped
don't
into
think
that
Eddie
deal.
Murphy is stupid, but Eddie Murphy clearly had an achievable threshold of if you pay me this much, I will do your bullshit. Because Eddie Murphy has done some things that are some bullshit.
I think the trailers for Haunted Mansion look good, but coming out the same time is
Really
the
do.
Marvels, right? Isn't that coming out the same time?
Is that coming? I don't. I is the Marvels coming out already?
I think so.
I mean, I don't keep up on this shit. I haven't been seeing commercials for it. There was that teaser like a month ago, but it's gone. I mean, I don't see it anymore.
Because I mean that we might see that in the theater.
I might also see that one in the theater. I'm excited for that one.
Oh no, sorry. The release date for that is November 10th. I must have
Why
They
you
must have
lies?
moved the date a couple times because I think I have it in my calendar wrong.
I watched video listicle thing recently about um actors who played the same character in two like unrelated movie series or two unrelated movies. And most of it's not that interesting, but the one I did think was interesting, speaking of Eddie Murphy, in Trading Places, he's got the two older financial guys who are the villains of the piece,
Yeah,
and at the end they are bankrupted.
yeah,
They show up in Coming to America as homeless dudes.
yeah,
It's the
yeah. They
same
do.
actors.
Yep.
I don't think I've ever seen Coming to America all the way through. I was just kind of never interested. For all that I loved Eddie Murphy in that time frame, I was not interested in that.
Well, I didn't make the connection when I saw it. I think I saw Coming to America in the theater. It was only recently when somehow Coming to America was like,
They made a sequel not too long ago.
oh, okay. So when that was happening, they mentioned that. They mentioned that those two guys were in that movie as homeless guys. I didn't notice that when I saw it the first time. I thought Coming to America was okay. I don't remember thinking it was
All
great, but it
all
was
of
okay.
a lot of Eddie Murphy's stuff from that time was really good and really important to both the comedy industry and my own personal take on humor. They also have not aged very well, almost across the board.
I think the
It's
only Eddie
weird to
Murphy
watch them now.
film I didn't see from that era, well, for one thing, I'm not sure I saw all of his is it Beverly Hills Cop? Is that what
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I don't think I saw all of those, but
I definitely saw all of those.
I didn't see Golden Child. I didn't see that. Is that Golden Child? Is that what it's
I
called?
saw Golden Child a lot. I love Golden Child. The real fun fact about Golden Child is Golden Child is the first place where I encountered, and many people encountered, but at that point didn't know who he was, Charles Dance,
Hmm.
because he is the villain in Golden Child. But this
Hmm.
was back when like people of my generation, like this was way before Game of Thrones and all that shit. Like he's been in his career has taken off since then. But yeah, he was a very Charles Dance like villain in Golden Child. I loved Golden Child. It also not aged well.
Well, why do you say? I mean, have you seen it recently or?
um, not too long ago, but also I just remember it. Like there's a lot of racial stuff in it, like almost everything Eddie Murphy did at that time. There's a lot of things about Asians and stuff in it, and it's just weird. And I mean all the other like 80s action movie tropes and stuff. And I mean Beverly Hills Cop, the first two of them I literally taped off of TV and watched them until I broke the tapes. I had them memorized for a while. Those things are horrendously problematic. The third one just sucks, and I was super excited when it was coming out, and we went and saw it in the theater, and it just kind of sucked. It was too late. It was too late to get back to that vibe.
I think I must have just seen the first one of those. I don't think I saw the other two.
The second one is very similar to the first.
He was kind of revolutionary. I mean, when
he was extremely revolutionary. He was huge.
Yeah, I think he will be remembered well as someone who contributed to American comedy and entertainment.
I would agree. He's a big deal.
Yep.
I mean, this happens. He's very much a product of his time in certain ways, and so a lot of his stuff has not aged well, but it was awesome at the time, and it was groundbreaking, and it was innovative, and it was clever, and it was funny.
Well, I think that's why when he was going to be in Haunted Mansion, I thought, yeah, this will be pretty good. I just thought it would be.
Yeah. No, but by that point, I mean, he had a good decade or so where he was not particularly producing good comedy. Haunted Mansion, all the Nutty Professor bullshit, the Clumps, And
he started so young. I mean, he clearly had some genius,
Oh yeah.
To do what he did.
He's like amazing. 12 years old and Delirious, and that thing was funny as hell.
Yeah, he is a considerable talent. But I am looking forward to it. I do like the cast. I like the trailer. We've talked about this before. When Haunted Mansion was created, one of the reasons why, if anyone's ever ridden a Haunted Mansion, I noticed this the first time I was ever in it. I think anyone who is a fan of the ride notices this. It's kind of uneven in its tone. It's like, wait, this seems really scary, but also really silly. It's like,
okay, you are about to tell a story that I have heard before, not from you, but from a video I watched on YouTube today.
No kidding.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, it's just that there was a disagreement among the people who created it, whether or not it should be scary or funny. And so it ends up being this weird, like I said, anyone who's ever ridden it, if you were paying any attention at all, would have noticed that, wow, sometimes this is really trying to scare you, but other times it's just not just funny, but silly, like comical.
It follows a pattern.
The
opening is the sort of scary part, and apparently the midpoint is when you're seeing the ghosts dance, and then after that it's pretty silly.
Well, the bride, though, is supposed to be scary, and that's kind of closer to the end.
That is kind of scary. That is true.
So there was this I've often talked about on the podcast, where one of the scary storylines was that, well, this was owned by a pirate, and he was a mean, terrible guy, and that's how the house got haunted. And I thought, oh, that would be nice for them to tie it in with Pirates of the Caribbean or something, right? But I think what they're doing. And so when they made the Eddie Murphy one, I think they just sort of committed to the silly side of it, right? There wasn't anything scary about it or any attempt to make it scary.
It was a kid's movie, essentially.
Yeah. I think this time they're trying to say, you know what? Comedy and horror go together all the time. This shouldn't be hard. It shouldn't be uneven or weird. It should work. And I think they're trying to make it work.
My only real concern with it is they could just make a Netflix. And that's the thing, is they have some amazing people. I'm sure they paid them very well, and it might be just a real phone in, a Red Notice or whatever,
Well, if you watch this thing today, then anyone who would have researched the early material would have found stuff there that's like usable. Like, there's some good material in what they came up with to make
Yeah.
the Haunted Mansion.
No,
So
the reason I know, and it's actually on my list to talk about, is so I watch a lot of videos from a collective of a couple of YouTube channels called Outside Xbox.
Hmm.
And there's some British video gamers that actually used to have a show called Inside Xbox that Microsoft had back in the day, and then they canceled that show, and so these people went and made a YouTube channel called Outside Xbox, and then eventually got a couple other people, and they have a second channel called Outside Extra, and they do video games, and they do live streams, and they do D&D actual plays, and whatever. I really like them. I'm slowly discovering that all of the channels like that I like are slowly drifting to where they're all British people. But anyway, I recently watched, they did an episode of a half hour that was just a vlog of them, all five of them, at Disneyland in 2019. They were coming to E3, and they came a day or two early so they could do Disneyland because a couple of them are big Disney heads. And one of them in particular is obsessed with the Haunted Mansion. And so they did eventually get to go there. And while they're in line, they sort of prompted him, and he starts talking. And the main thing he talked about was those two guys and how they had different visions for it. And they had a counter in the corner that said Haunted Mansion facts end in, and then it was a countdown in case you heard the
well, I mean, I'm kind of the same. I mean, I'm actually not a Disney person in any sense of the word, but I'm kind of a fan of Epcot, and I'm a real huge fan of Haunted Mansion. I just the first time I went,
also go to Galaxy's Edge.
Oh, see, that might be cool. I might.
And one of them made a lightsaber, which was funny because we watched the whole thing, and well, not the whole thing, but I mean like an edited version. And there's lots of kids, and there's all sorts of people. And one of the things is you get to pick which Kyber crystal, and you have 4 to pick from. Yellow's not an option, weirdly. Blue and green, purple, even though there aren't that many because Mace Windu made it so popular, and then red if you're a fucked up kid. And then at the end, after you put it all together, you stick it on this thing, and it basically hooks it to the blade underneath. But what it actually does is it powers it up, and so all of them suddenly have these tubes that are the color of the things, and then it unhooks and they all hold them up. From the shot I could see, which was most of the class, they all fucking picked purple. Just the whole room was just a glow in purple, which admittedly is a cool color.
Original hard hat Mark McKibben went with his wife, I think they stayed in the, they did that
holy crap
where you stay in the ship or whatever. What's that called?
Yeah, it only cost $8 million for 2 nights.
I think they did that. They had costumes and everything.
Yeah, it's a whole fully inclusive thing, but it was, at least when they first announced it, it was expensive as hell.
Well, it's not going to be around for very long, I heard.
That's very cool though. Yeah, because they really did the whole Westworld thing where you were in it.
With costumes
actually, and someone, I read an article when it was first happening. Somebody was really trying to sort of role play within Galaxy's Edge, and the cast members got really into it because they wore they're a little more lax about the cosplay rules in Galaxy's Edge a little bit, and so they kind of were dressed for it because they're trying to make it an immersive thing. And one of them had been practicing Galactic Basic because, like Klingon, it's a thing. And the cast members knew all their phrases and whatever, so they sat around and would practice the language, and I think they played sabacc and stuff like this, and the cast members really enjoyed them, really getting into it, which is not how I would expect that to go.
Yeah, I don't know. I've thought about going. I mean, I don't know if I'll ever get to Disney World again, but if I did, I think I'd try to do that. But yeah, Haunted Mansion, when I first saw it, I thought this is amazing. And I've been on other attractions that use similar technologies or more updated technologies, like in Universal. They had this great, they used to have, I don't know if they still do, this great Spider-Man ride I think it's 3D, but anyway, it's graphic and Spider-Man's running around and he'll like land on the thing you're in and it'll move and stuff. I mean, beautiful. But
Wow.
a lot of what they did, some of those same types of techniques conventionally were done in the Haunted Mansion, and it's like this is brilliant. This whole thing is so genius. And I liked haunted houses anyway. I've always liked haunted houses. I just thought it was so good. And so I've been a fan of Haunted Mansion for a really long time. And it would be fun to have a good movie based on it.
Haunted Mansion in Disneyland was like one of the only haunted houses I ever managed to go through.
Hmm.
I was like 12 and we actually did it. And the scariest part for me that I mean, and at the time when I've been to Disney World a few times and we've gone multiple times there, I really enjoy it now because it's not my level for scares has changed as I've gotten older. But in general, haunted houses are not my thing. Uh, but I remember being 12, and the thing that stands out most to me was I was there with my brother and his girlfriend. I think I've told this story before. I was supposed to go stay with him for a few days up in Portland because that's a thing we would do. Both my siblings would just like have me come visit for a few days because I was so much younger. So once they were like grown-ups and had their own places. So he comes down to get me, and I'm excited to go because it's my big brother and we're going to do cool stuff or whatever. But they want to come in and sit down and talk, and mom and dad are like, so where are you gonna go? And I'm like, what are they talking about? We're going to Portland. He's like, well, I think we're gonna head south. I'm like, south? What? Like, where are we going? And he's like, well, I think we're gonna go south down to like Ashland, which is the town in Oregon, right on the border of California, where they have the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. And I was that nerdy of a kid that like I was, oh, what are we gonna go to Ashland? That's cool. Go see Shakespeare. It's like, oh yeah, and that was like, I think we're just gonna go down south until we reach Disneyland. And I was like, because they always knew I wanted to go, but my old ass parents weren't going to do it or whatever, so my brother did it, and it was very cool. But that was him and his girlfriend took, and we
Oh,
road
that's
trip
nice.
down and did it. It was great. It was awesome. But we went on the Haunted Mansion, and all three of us, because I was pretty little, maybe I was younger than 12, maybe I was like 8 or something, I don't know. But so all three of us were in one cart,
Oh yeah.
and at the end, as you know, they're like, so you had fun? Well, guess what? The whole fucking time there's been a ghost sitting with you, motherfuckers. And they have a really cool effect
Very cool.
where
Yeah.
you can see a holographic ghost sitting in between the two people
Mhm.
in the mirror.
Mhm.
Unless you have a child sitting between you, and then you're looking, and the child thinks he turned into a ghost because it's on top of him. Freaked me out. Stuck with me to this
Doom
to this
buggies, I
day. I
think they
won't
call those
sit in the
cards.
middle of people. No,
That's
I was
good.
gonna bring up the the Disney vlog. Two reasons. One, I don't have anything else to talk about. And two, what I really noticed is this was from E3 2019. So many moments in this video, I was like, what the hell are they're doing? And then I was like, oh wait, we used to do that in the before times. Like I watched them fucking share a churro, 5 of them. I'm like, that doesn't happen anymore. But it took me a while because it's been a few years. I was like, what the? Oh, yeah. There was a time I probably would have done that too with people that I was close to regularly. But I looked at them like they'd grown a second head. I was like, what are you doing? Just so many things like that in tight, confined places and like, yeah, all sorts of.
Hmm.
And I was just like, we don't do those things anymore. I don't. This is a weird historical artifact.
What else is on your list?
Very little. Basically, we finished High Desert.
Oh yeah, gosh, I keep thinking we should watch that.
No,
Oh no, don't watch it?
don't watch it. Well,
Oh.
okay. Here's what I'll tell you, because we got a lot of time to kill. I think I enjoyed it in general. There are major sympathy issues involved because there's lots of people lying and doing bad stuff, and even the people that were in support of it's around whatever. It's a crazy ass show. It's one of those like comedy of errors things where just so many things all these plot lines are building on each other. There's only 8 episodes. It ends on about 7 cliffhangers, and it already has been canceled.
Oh.
So, and especially near the end, it really started to strike me as a show that could have blossomed in a second season, because the show has baked in, everyone in the show has history in their various relationships, and some of them are explored and some of them are only hinted at. Like near the end, you find out about like somebody's identity is not who they were, and there's also and like stuff that would be really interesting in a second season, but ain't gonna happen.
That's too bad.
And it literally ends with somebody about to be shot out of a cannon. Like literally, they get in the cannon and the screen goes black, and you hear the cannon fire, and then the credits roll. But yeah, it was all right. We are almost done with Atlanta. Still fascinated by that. I don't know what we'll watch next. Oh, I do have a thing to talk about. So as we all know, if you don't, check yourself because you do know. I watch a lot of Dropout.tv, streaming service from the people who used to be College Humor and now are Dropout. And one of the things they have on there is Dimension 20, which is a bunch of actual play campaigns of D&D, and I really enjoy those. And I'm me, so I'm watching them in order, even though like the different campaigns are unrelated. I still have to watch them in like the order they aired, so I'm several seasons back. But they just started a new one that I decided maybe I wanted to watch as it comes out, and my wife also wanted to watch. So we watched the first episode, which was like 2 hours long, of Dungeons and Drag Queens.
And
it is Brennan Lee Mulligan running a D&D game for 4 drag queens, some of which at least I know have been on RuPaul's Drag Race, and I think even won. And some of them I just know the names of, but I don't know. The 4 players are Bob the Drag Queen, who's the one that I know from RuPaul's Drag Race, Alaska Thunderfuck, who I think might also be from RuPaul's Drag Race, Monet Exchange, which is a familiar name, and then one whose her name is just Jubilee, I think. And those are their actual names, not their character names. And it seems like none of them have played D&D before, and so that makes it for a whole different dynamic. But also, drag queens that perform are a version of improv. So they are really there. They are pulling stuff right away. And of course it's full of all sorts of double entendres and shade throwing and stuff like that throughout that you wouldn't normally see. But I really find it a interesting sort of refreshing change for things. But and they're just goofy because of course one of them's an assassin, and she's like, we have to go here because one of my marks is here, and one of the people's like, Mark who? And he's like, no, she's like, my mark that I have to kill. It's like, but Mark who? Like Mark, and finally she's like, Mark Ronson. It's like, oh, what did he do? It's like he did all sorts of crimes, grand theft, larceny. It's like, oh yeah, who he steal from? it's Jubilee. She's the one. She also when Brennan is giving his whole speech at the beginning and like his spooky like premise setting or whatever, he talks about the goddess would grant boons and gifts to her, and Jubilee's like, who's boons? What's a boons? It's like, a boon is like a wish. It grants wish. So she's like, who did he steal from? And he's like, Paula Abdul. And then they all just start laughing. And I have to look this fucker up. Mark Ronson, because I'm like, that name is too specific. Mark Ronson is a music producer of songs you wrote. He's in the same sort of circles as like David Guetta or things like that, or Calvin Harris. And so it became a thing. And wove it into the story. They were like looking for him, and the bartender in this fantasy village was like, "You mean famous American music producer Mark Ronson? Yeah, he was just in here yesterday saying how he like fell through a hole and now he's not even in his home world and he thinks he's losing his mind." And we were all like, "Dude, it's portals. Just relax." So it's being real goofy, but they're really into it, and they're really good at just rolling with the punches, which is the thing I love about a good actual play D&D. So that's fun. I don't got a lot. I don't really got nothing else. I don't know what to tell you. This is sad. We don't have nothing.
Well, let me see if there's any
So
emails happen to come
sad.
in, because sometimes Jazz slips right into.
I had I do find it interesting that Jazz writes a novelette on the blog, and you're on vacation, and yet you can't be bothered to respond to any of her stuff. Normally, you're all up in there when like you're too busy to be doing that kind of crap, but when you got time to relax.
Well, I mean, I am trying to do this not doing anything thing.
Hookers and blow. You don't have a concussion. You're just on break from school.
Having a concussion, that's a lot what it's like.
You just need to find ways to not use the same brain muscles as you do in school. You can still use your brain.
But it's like you say, Jazz writes a lot, and sometimes it's.
Yes, but you don't notice that. I'm the one who notices that, which is why I only responded to like 10% of it, because I was like, this is too much.
I'm looking at the blog right now. I know I'm not supposed to.
What else we got going on?
But she talked about Oreos. She talked about representation. She talked about
representation of Oreos.
Oh, and she talked about children's lit stuff too, which was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, donkey skin, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Did you not know about that?
I don't think I knew. Yeah, I knew some of those. I didn't know some of those. Like,
yeah, donkey skin. I think in the version of the Grim Tales I have, that actually a version of that was in there.
There is a
I've read it somewhere. I don't know where.
There was a series of short story anthologies that were coming out sort of in my college years that were essentially retelling, like darker grown-up retellings of fairy tales.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget the titles, but they had titles like Snow White, Rose Red. It was a lot of like this than that titles that were meant to be all sexy and whatever. And I read the first one. I think I sort of stopped. I think I got a little bored real quick, but that one was talking about how the Grimm brothers sanitized a lot of these things and all this. And it specifically talked about Little Red Riding Hood. And that's why I always remember Little Red Riding Hood, because it is much more adult and also doesn't fucking make sense. Because Red Riding Hood comes in as like, "Hey, Grandma, what's up? You look weird. What big things you have?" And Grandma's like, "Yeah, come and cuddle in the bed with me." Okay, I'm fine with here. Little Red Riding Hood's like, okay. And then Grandma, who again is a wolf, is visibly a wolf, but whatever, is like, "No, take off all your clothes."
Yeah.
And I'm immediately like, but you know, different times, whatever.
Different times.
Just like, okay. And then the wolf is like, okay, throw him in the fire. And at this point, Red Riding Hood dumb. Like, this isn't like, Amazon will never ask you for your password if we're customer service or whatever. You shouldn't have to be like, your real grandma would never ask you to throw all your clothes in the fire. And then she gets into bed naked with the wolf dressed as a grandma. I mean, this was before the internet. Um, and then I believe at this point she clicks in, like the penny drops, some at least that some shit is up. And her answer is, excuse me, grandma, I gotta get out of this bed for a minute. I have to go potty.
Yeah, have to go to the bathroom, right?
And the wolf is like, nah, just do it here. And that's the last part I remember, because at that point my brain was like, this is a collection of words. This is not a story. This is just a series of nouns and verbs and things. Because no, this does what? Like, that story only makes sense if it is a poorly written fetish story on a website.
I mean, you know, sometimes when I read things like this story and it's purported to come from, you know, someone went to a particular location and they listened to a person recount this story orally and they wrote it down, presumably exactly the way it was told to them. And it was told to them in a language not English, and they had to interpret it into English or whatever. And it's possible
And
that
they had a burgeoning piss fetish that they didn't tell anybody about.
and there's other cultural things that you might not be told about. I kind of like, I try to think to myself, what, you know, what kind of, especially if I have any familiarity with the language it was translated from, which I normally don't. But German, you know, I have a little knowledge of German and how it relates to English. So I'll try to think what kind of cultural or linguistic things might be going on here. For example, having the girl undress first. I mean, I think there was a time where, you know, if you there was a time where if you were outdoors for any particular period of time, especially if you traveled from one place to another on foot through woods and whatever, your clothes were not clean. So, you know, it might not have been an unusual request to say, no, take those dirty clothes off before you get into
You're
this clean
not
bed.
understanding. The wolf has no opposable thumbs. And you got to unwrap the food before you eat it. That part I understand, except Red Riding Hood's part of it. But it's like, yeah, no. If his prey was a honey bun, he'd tell the honey bun, like, get out of your wrapper and then come see Grandma Honey Bun.
Yes, that's the reason. But for Red Riding Hood, it might not have seemed like an unusual request. Now, throwing the clothes in the fire, maybe, but that's another thing is that that culturally at that time, you know, kids weren't supposed to ask questions. They were just supposed to do what their parents said. And I think there was probably even at that time an understanding that while this was generally a good thing because it kept kids out of trouble and it made kids stay away from dangerous places, I think everybody knew that it also meant kids were vulnerable to adults who would just tell them to do any random thing and the kids would do it. And I think that was supposed to be a scary part of it.
This is a very interesting, this is reminding me of something I've been thinking about lately. Porn.
Okay.
Or let me back up a little bit. How does a person, any person, learn about sexual activity? Not about procreation, but about sexual acts. What are the sources? I think there's only a few.
Oh, really? You think there's only a few?
Yes. I mean, in broad categories, but yes.
Well, it's kind of a thing that sort of begs the question, because one answer, of course, is peers, but where did they hear of it? If you just keep saying peers, some peer had to hear it from somewhere else first.
Yeah. Or make it up. Okay, so yeah, so
peers is a big
your community, and we can even throw in family members, parents, older siblings. Presumably, I mean, there is the trope of parents teaching the birds and the bees to the kids, and I think sometimes that happens. I think that is a potential source, but it sort of falls into the same category of the people around you.
Okay. I mean, I would still draw a distinction between a fellow child who doesn't really know what they're talking about telling you versus your parents telling you,
Yes,
or
yes.
some
Well, and
knowledgeable
that's the thing.
adult.
I didn't say quality of the source, just the existence of the source. I'm. I should. I want to repeat. I said, what are the sources for information about sexual activities? I did not say accurate information,
Okay, so
and
so
that's
if
very intentional.
if I say peers to 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 match what you're asking, that's just people. Like some person tells them. That's a source.
Like
Another
an
person.
individual.
Versus they see somebody in the act accidentally or on purpose even, and that's a whole other source. Okay.
Yes.
Um
Yeah, well, but yeah, we can say that. Okay.
well, if we're defining sources so broadly, I'm not sure it would someone would have to tell you or you'd have to witness it. What other way would there be besides that?
Well, pornography.
Is that's witnessing it though.
How are you defining pornography?
As a graphical representation of sexual acts, I guess.
No, I don't think it has to be graphical. I put all sorts of erotic stories and everything like that as also pornography.
Okay, I mean that's fair. I guess.
But artistic expression expressly for titillation.
But you're drawing a distinction between seeing a graphical, like a picture of some people having sex, and a written description of people having sex.
No, I am not, actually.
Oh, you're not. Okay.
This is what I'm saying. This is all tied in. So you could say if you just are watching people engaged in a sexual activity, that is also a form of pornography. But there are also examples where, like, you walk in on your parents or you're spying on somebody, and I don't know
you're
that
drawing
I would call
a distinction between those things.
Pornography necessarily. Okay. And then, of course, the other source, and it is also other people, but in a different way, any partners. So, like,
like actually experiencing it yourself.
You get married or whatever, and you all figure it out together.
And that's distinguished.
Or one of them comes in with more knowledge, and then it becomes.
And you're distinguishing that from learning from a peer.
Yes, because it is a hands-on learning. Like my cousin, if my cousin tells me when you have sex, this is what you do.
So these are your distinctions.
Up to the elbow and things like this.
There's direct secondhand information, mediated secondhand information, like through written or pictorial representation, and firsthand information.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, the reason I bring this up is I had not ever realized, to me, that historically the pornography debate is as follows. First of all, there is the very legitimate discussion of the porn industry and the systemic issues within there, which are horrible, but really should be set aside as a separate discussion outside of critiquing the concept of pornography. So I'm going to set that aside.
Okay.
Like, it's one thing to say the porn industry is terribly exploitative and illegal and all this stuff. Yes. But that's not the same thing as saying the concept of pornography, like pornography shouldn't exist as a thing or whatever, same sort of deal. So I don't consider that the same debate. But the debate is there is some moral failing in it or some form of extramarital affair in it. And then the others, and also that it will make people do horrible things, and it gives horrible examples of, like, people think that's what sex is supposed to be like, and it's not, or whatever.
It's addictive. There's all kinds of
and it is addictive as with so many things, and there's that kind of stuff versus the pro side, which is essentially, well, first of all, sometimes downplaying some of the claims of the anti side, along the same way of violent video games don't make you violent, like that kind of thing. Fantasy doesn't make you reality, but also it's largely a civil liberties argument. It is a people want to do it, if people want to see it, what business is that of yours? And I am pro pornography, and I am pro this particular argument. I only recently realized also, though, porn has the potential to create very important sexual representation, because let's say you're a boy from Iowa and you are raised by parents who don't talk to you about sex, except maybe in the most perfunctory sense of what it's for in terms of procreation, maybe even in a very repressive sense of what God is and is not okay with. And let's say that because of that, or because of other reasons, you do not engage in any sort of consumption of pornography. And then let us also say you are not a popular kid. And so you do not hang out with peers who also, at the age when they want to talk about sex, talk with you about sex. And eventually, someday, you. Oh, and also, this is in a time period where pornography was not nearly as available anyway, let's say. All of this seems very feasible as a scenario. Not everybody, but there will be plenty of people who fall into this category
I mean,
throughout history.
I can tell you as a person who grew up in Iowa,
there we go.
That's very plausible. That what most of the young men, young boys in your scenario, they'll know what sex is and procreation is because they live on farms or they know people live on farms. That's that what you were talking about, where they have this very basic knowledge of what it is and how it happens and what it results in. But like you said, might not or aren't told anything else about that.
Yeah. And so in that situation, your knowledge and understanding of sexual activity, of the entire breadth and diversity of sexual activity, is basic mechanics of procreation, and whatever you and your eventual spouse spontaneously come up with yourself.
Right.
And meanwhile, with pornography, which has a lot of issues or whatever, people can see things, and I have had this experience myself. There's a lot of things in porn that people can get the wrong idea and like, oh, that's how it works. That's not how it works at all. But I have seen things in porn that I'm like, wow, I didn't know that was a thing, and that's pretty hot. I want to look into that more. And in fact, this is when they crack me. So sometimes when I can't sleep at night, I do weird researches on things and fall down rabbit holes of stuff or whatever. And recently I ended up doing one involving very specific physical sex acts throughout LGBTQIA populations. I won't go into details, but I was sort of looking into these, and there are sex acts that, according to actual studies that have done stuff, there are large demographics of the queer population who say, yes, this is a thing I do often with my lovers. And there are some people, large swaths of people in that same demographic group who say, that's not a real thing that people like me do. That's just a thing porn invented.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah, it's the porn version of the stand up, sit down to wipe thing.
Sure.
And I've had versions of this too. I have been sitting around with people, because I hang out with friends and we'll talk about sex on the day, who have talked about something and they're like, I remember that being a big deal when I was a kid and we would talk about it a lot, but it like never comes up in my relationships. And they said it and I was like, really? That's probably the most common thing I do in my sexual relationships. Is that, and it wasn't like a weird like sexual preference thing or whatever. We were occupying the same space, and because of our personal experiences, one of us was like, that's not a real thing, and I was like, it's literally a real thing. It's something I have done a lot. And only recently did I see this value in pornography. And it is actually kind of funny. I do believe what clicked this in my head was you.
Oh, wonderful.
Now I back in the day, I would have said you're extremely private about your own proclivities, but I don't think that's the case anymore, because you have in recent years been very open about you being incredibly average vanilla.
Just in general as a person, sure.
Yes, but well, and in this sort of context, I think you've talked about this, because we have talked about, when we were talking about the sex positive gaming thing and you wanting to stand up for the rights of people to do that, you said in context of that, it's always been odd for you because you don't really have any of those things.
I guess that's true, yeah.
And that's it. But I found myself the other day wondering, I'm like, what if they're like, and again, recently, mostly because of your graduate work, you've had to look into this stuff more. But I'm like, what if there's shit out there that William would be into, but he doesn't know about? And I found myself thinking, I know William really well. I watch a lot of porn and read a lot of porn and involved in a lot of porn and a wide breadth. And I'm always like, if I hear of a new kink, I'll go look into it to see if it's a thing that does anything for me. And I'm like, what if I found something that like I might think will, like, I couldn't. And here's the thing, and it was immediately like I couldn't tell. Like I thought about I could do this thing where I text you and be like, we never have to speak of this, but just in case you can totally ignore it, whatever, here's a link. Like that was, and I was like, no, I can't do that. And I was just overcome by this thing of like, I found that really sad. And in retrospect, I don't, because there are so many things that you choose not to experience that are awesome and whatever. And you live your life. And we've had this discussion before of having a reason to do something versus a reason not. But I realized that you're you. There are a bunch of people who that would be the same exact circumstance who really might be missing out on like some awesome stuff. And that was sad. And then I realized the importance sort of porn, because it is one of the few other than asking your neighbor or your cousin or your parent or your school chum, one of your only other sources is basically porn to even like know what is possible.
Hmm.
And I don't know that it gets utilized enough in an educational context.
So first of all, let me speak to this hypothetical person you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think
I was lying. He's from Kansas.
I think there's a certain attitude a person can have about sex where it's highly unlikely that anything they learn from another person or through pornography or whatever is going to mean anything to them, because psychologically and emotionally they contextualize sex as a thing that's like all the fun that you get out of it is with your partner and understanding what your partner likes and your partner cares what you like. So, hearing about someone else's experience in some erotica or pornography or whatever is just, that's not going to mean anything. I mean, in a way, absolutely. it can give you an idea, I guess, of what's possible, like you're saying. But if a person is, if a person's all about, well, what am I and this person going to do? They're completely absorbed in whatever comes up between them spontaneously. And maybe pornography would give them idea to try something. But
you're talking, it's a very, most people who would identify as demisexual, and a fair number of people who express as asexual, I think, would fall into the camp you're talking about. And that is,
I guess that's what I'm saying.
Definitely a thing.
So there's that. But there's also,
I'm not saying this is, I'm not saying literally every person should go out and look at porn.
I know you're not. I'm just acknowledging this type of person who approaches sex in this type of way. But I think, though, you are correct about, because here's the thing: when you're going into be a therapist and a couples therapist, you're going to run into couples that are like, someone's bored or someone wants to try something the other person doesn't. Yeah. And so you do come into a context where this couple, if the marriage is going to survive, because that can break a marriage, someone can be I want to do this and I don't want to do this. And that's not a trivial thing in a marriage that can break up a marriage. So the two people are going to have to get creative in negotiating their sexual life together. And how do they, when in any other activity, like if I was counseling an individual person and it was clear they were having a creative block or they were lacking creativity in their life, I would have them, paint or write stories or whatever, but I would also maybe have them read a book about such things or whatever. In any other creative block, I would encourage them to talk to other people who do it or to look at, other things that do it. And when it comes to sexuality, it's hard to imagine how it can or should be different. But as you say, if that material doesn't exist, then they can't do that. But the material does exist. So
And that was the thing when I was following this trail in my head. I was like, yeah, so before porn, they really had a heart. And then I was like, there isn't such a thing as before porn.
There's not. I was going to mention the Kama Sutra and all that stuff. I mean, there's always
And
been.
even further back. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah. Because
speculations on Venus of Willendorf and
right, because the thing is, every human activity has had people who study it,
wanted to
who,
fuck it.
no, who study
I
it, who
mean-
want to gather information about it to pass on to future generations, and sex is no different. So, so that's just always been true for human beings, and it's always been true in human, and as long as there's been this thing we call human civilization, that's always been present there too. So it's just a matter of, is this a tool that you're using in a, therapeutic context, if I can put it that way?
No, I think that's the right term, because that's why this is a revelation. I mean, I'm sure there are people who are listening who are like, obviously, and also gross, Tony, shut up. But I've always been very pro pornography. I'm a huge pervert. I like my porn, whatever. But it has very much always been a civil liberties thing. Like, this is a freedom of expression. This is something that we enjoy. As long as we do it in a way that minimizes harm and force to others.
But that's true of everything.
Who the hell cares? Yes,
that's true
absolutely,
of everything.
Absolutely. And only now have I come to the realization that also pornography, erotica, whatever you want to call it, artistic expression for the purpose expressly of titillation, can have important positive and therapeutic effects. And that had never really registered in my head before. I mean, on a base term of people who have problems related to sex, but as an idea of like, this can be a way for you to grow as a person sexually.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the first thing a person who's interested in a therapeutic application, I think the first thing they think of is, of course, fantasy and things like that. But the fantasies that other people have come up with obviously are going, to be something that helps, that can help certain people who might be creatively blocked in those ways. And again, this can be something that's really important to keeping a couple together. And if that's what the couple wants.
Of sexual catharsis, and there can be a lot of non-sexual catharsis to be found in sexual activity. I have been there myself to a degree. Not only have I found that certain sexual activities can create tremendous emotional catharsis in me, I have found some activities of that nature that are so strongly tied to issues that I have that I cannot engage. For lack of a better term, it's not that like this is bad. I mean, maybe this is oversharing again, but I have found kinks and fetishes and flavors that hit something in me so strong and powerful that it is not something I can cope with dealing with.
Sure.
And so I have to but it's not like I am repelled by that. It's like kind of the opposite.
Well, there are also,
and I have learned a lot about myself again outside of sexuality through the expression of these things.
Sure. And there are also, some people can have difficult past experiences that either are sexual or have a sexual component, that present sexual activities and practices can be therapy for dealing with those things. Yeah.
Comedian Jackie Cation years ago talked about her, I think at the time boyfriend, now husband. She would, I think it was an issue with her crying during sex with them. Something they were doing triggered crying, and he was of course worried. And to be honest, I've known people and they cry for various reasons. Sometimes it's not a big deal. In her case, something about what was happening was triggering a memory of essentially abuse from her past with a stranger.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And it wasn't that it was bad, it was that actually some part of her found it pleasurable, and then she was ashamed of that fact, and it was just very complicated. And her boyfriend, sort of because of the way his analytical mind worked, came up with an idea that essentially it was something that happened on a bus. And what they did was they used a bunch of dining room chairs and they put them in the kitchen, and they essentially recreated the bus. But in place of the aggressor, was him, and apparently his exact words were, "But now you're doing it with me, and you like me," and apparently it fucking worked. Like, it turned the experience from a conflicted, like, good but also bad and shameful one into just a good one.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember finding that really amazing. I'm like, I would not have thought of that, but that's,
I mean, that's consistent with a lot of what we know about PTSD treatments and a few other things. That's perfectly consistent with that. Although it might be as a treatment, quote unquote, it might not be something a person would think about for obvious reasons, but it's perfectly consistent with what we know about how these things can be treated.
admittedly, it seemed kind of haphazard. I could see a couple of ways in which it might have gone spectacularly wrong, but that's because her husband was not a professional therapist, but a video game designer. But
right, but
well
it's about the relationship they had.
And
I mean, that's true in any,
and I mean,
therapeutic situation.
I would defer to his expertise over mine, obviously.
Yeah.
Is his significant other.
Yeah.
I have listened to a lot of her albums, but I still don't feel like I could necessarily pin her down to that.
Yeah, that's very interesting stuff for sure.
I've just always enjoyed my perversions, and every once in a while I'm like, you know what? There's also a lot of like genuinely socially positive stuff that can come out of these things.
I mean, like anything that's a tool,
You're a tool.
It really is all in how you, it's like, people complain about the internet, like it causes things or it does things. No, the internet doesn't do anything. It's how it's used. People are using it in a particular way, and the internet's not making them do that. And there are some people who are using it in a responsible way, and it's done nothing but help people feel connected. It's helped people find communities that they wouldn't have found otherwise. And those are undeniably good things. It's helped people learn things that they wouldn't have learned otherwise. So, we need to take a nuanced perspective on all the tools and technologies we develop and understand what things that they give us that are good, what things they give us that aren't good or bad, they're just neutral. And the things that people are doing with them that are harmful, we need to acknowledge that and put the blame where it belongs, to the people who are doing it, and address that, not the tool that's being used.
If you would like to talk about your sexual proclivities to William and have him help analyze your situation, go to the blog, themagicaltalkinghat.com. No, we're getting to this point. You're almost done with your coursework. We're going to get into the real reason people keep listening, and it's free mental health care. So, yeah, put all your stuff for doctor. Wait, you won't have your doctorate. You'll have your master's. Master William. I still think that joke is really good. I really like that joke. No, but anything you have to say about any of these topics, go to the blog, magicaltalkinghead.com. Also, if you'd like to avoid me talking about porn for half the episode again, maybe you should write in an email.
No, I thought it was a useful.
themagicaltalkinghat@gmail.com.
I thought that was a useful.
I was not talking to you. I'm talking to the listeners.
Useful.
If you don't write in this, if
conversation.
nobody writes in this week, y'all are a bunch of nasty freaks, and this podcast is going to take a turn, and I'm here for it. I just want y'all to be ready. I may show up in a different outfit. William may have to use other terms when talking to me. We may have to discuss safe words. It's the thing. But if you email, I'll assume we should just keep doing what we're doing. And yeah, if you listen to 50 or more episodes, William legally has to give you free therapy once he has his credentials.